Plans for the U.S. to rejoin the TPP could be back on the table, but amid growing protectionist trade policies, will the U.S. really say yes? And China's infrastructure efficiency grabbed the global spotlight with an online video of a train station junction being built in just 9 hours. How can China's infrastructure race ahead the rest? Welcome to The Point. Live from Beijing, I'm Li Xin. On Tuesday, the Trump administration said that plans to rejoin the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, could be back on the table. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin made the comment during a meeting sponsored by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Originally negotiated by the Obama administration as part of his pivot to Asia strategy, the agreement aimed to cut trade barriers between Pacific Rim countries. President Trump withdrew from the pact immediately after taking office last year. So what's behind this renewed interest? Would the U.S. join a revamped version or watered down version, some people say, of the pact? And in the wake of this new trade tariffs, how is the U.S. balancing its America First outlook in an increasingly globalized world? Joining me for the discussion are Yoritsumi Watanabe, Professor of International Political Economy at Keio University in Tokyo. In New York, Max Wolf, Chief Economist at iCash Group, and in our Beijing studio, Xu Sitao, Chief Economist at Deloitte China. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Professor Watanabe, 3 days after he took office, U.S. President Donald Trump yanked the U.S. out of the trade deal. Now, just over a year later, as I said, Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin announced that rejoining the pact is back on the table. Now, we know the formal signing ceremony for the TPP 11, which is the version after the U.S. withdrew, is being planned to take place in a week in Chile. Why is the U.S. making this announcement now?
Well, I certainly welcome this. If this is a really kind of genuine move, I certainly welcome the United States thinking of coming back to the TPP deal. Why now? Well, I think this is certainly coincided with the signing ceremony to be expected on the 8th of March in Santiago. And I'm sure that, very fact that 11 countries agreed on this TPP 11 pushed forward the United States to rethink and reassess the value and the content of the TPP 12, the original version of TPP that the 12 nations agreed in October 2015 and signed in February 2016. So I think this is the very positive move forward, and also I would think that it's a result of kind of internal struggle within the Trump administration or even within White House, because there are two camps with regard to international trade. There is a very pro-trade camp, which is headed by Mr. Gary Cohn, and the other group is economic nationalist camp, headed by Mr. Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, and also Peter Navarro, the chief of the Economic Council within the White House. So there has been quite a bit of struggle or confrontation between them, and I would suspect that now the issues of TPP, now it's in the process of being reassessed within the administration and White House.
Right. It is a very curious question, because if they didn't want to join a year ago, why would they want to join now? It is said that the new agreement is a watered-down version of the original agreement, which is probably even less in the U.S. interest. Mr. Wolf, from your understanding, could you really explain to us what is the difference between TPP 11 and the content of the 12?
Well, thank you very much for this
a great question. A pleasure to be here.
Clarifying question.
Sorry, this question is for Mr. Wolf.
Yes. Oh, I see. I'm sorry for that.
Mr. Wolf, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, to me it looks the following. Part of the purpose of TPP was to strengthen the U.S. hand in Asia. There's really no way to understand that without an effort to maybe make the United States a little bit more powerful again vis-a-vis some lost ground against the emerging economic powerhouse of the region, which is fairly clearly China. And so that was part of the initial design of TPP. And it was also an attempt to strengthen American allies, potentially to have a bunch of trade skirmishes, possibly with China as well as a few other nations. And so it was really a strategy to basically double down and re-strengthen American alliances and have a bit of a counterweight to China. When we dropped out, two things happened. I think there had been a bit of a foolish hope that TPP would fizzle without the U.S. and fade. It did not. It went forward. It went forward with China, and therefore it became an aggravation of the decline of American influence in Asia, which it was designed to prevent. Fast forward by a year, I would only say, before I answer the question, a cautionary note. President Trump has not tended to be terribly polite to or always in lockstep with his own cabinet. So what cabinet members say and what becomes policy are less close lately than they have historically been here in the U.S. But with that caveat, it looks like folks have realized that what they tried to achieve by leaving the TPP was actually undermined, and they would now like to come back. The final irony, I would say, especially in light of our increasingly nationalist anti-free trade rhetoric here in the U.S., is we may no longer be much welcomed by the group that was sad to see us go one short year ago.
Mr. Xi, how do you look at the announcement that the U.S. might rejoin the TPP? Do you think the U.S. is really serious about it? I mean, again, what's the difference between the TPP now and the TPP to a month ago?
I think, first of all, the second question, what's the difference between now and 12 months ago? I think that everyone knew TPP without the U.S., which is the deepest market, is going to be less significant. We all know that. But having said that, with these 11 countries, we could see ripple effect. So, for example, South Korea may look at that. South Korea is a major country, the 11th largest economy in the world, and potentially even countries like Thailand and Indonesia may look into that. So I think this potential reactions from other countries prompt the U.S. to rethink. Now, this first question is, I think it's going to take a long time for the U.S. to do that, at least under the Trump administration.
To rejoin the TPP?
I think so. I think it's easier said that, but it's not that easy, because the difference between 11 countries and 12 countries, I think the threshold for the U.S.-led TPP would have more stringent requirement on, for example, IP requirement, protection, so on and so forth. And some of the countries currently within the 11 countries may not be ready. I don't think they are ready.
It is very peculiar because they're talking about coming back into the pact. However, we are only about a week away from the signing ceremony. So is the U.S. talking about renegotiating the deal, or are they talking about joining the rest as they are, just signing the agreement in the ceremony? Professor Watanabe, what is your take on this?
Well, first of all, the main purpose of TPP 11 is actually to bring the United States back to the original form of TPP. So TPP 11 is a kind of ouverture. This is an opening for the U.S. membership, and this has been very carefully designed. And for instance, I can give you an example. For instance, the market access element in the TPP 12 has remained untouched. And some very sensitive question like the period of protection of data on biometrics. This was what the United States wanted to bring into TPP 12, and that has been suspended. Put into the fridge. But once the United States comes back, that will be defreezed, you see. So actually TPP 11 may be two purposes. One is to bring the United States back, and the other is not to lose the momentum of trade liberalization and liberalization of investment across Asia Pacific. So, this is a question whether the United States wants to come back to the original TPP or not, you see. There will be no negotiation, because we have already agreed on the TPP 12 back in October 2015. So this is up to the United States to come back, and all those items, issues that the United States gave priorities or importance, that will be defreezed once the United States will be back.
Very interesting. It's almost a little bit tricky to understand, but during an interview at last month's Davos World Economic Forum, President Trump said that he would consider a renegotiated TPP deal if the agreement was made substantially better in terms of achieving U.S. trade goals. So, Mr. Wolf, what does that substantially better mean? Do you think he is seeing that now in the TPP 11?
I think that would be a reasonable guess. The problem with President Trump is when asked about any trade agreement at any time, often clearly with little or no knowledge as to what is in the trade agreement or what it means, he simply says he would do a better job, it isn't good enough for America, and he would only be open to a version which is better for America, which is a perfectly reasonable theoretical kind of
right. I have to jump in here. Sorry,
policy.
Mr. Wolf. We have just been told that British Prime Minister Theresa May is delivering a speech in London outlining her plan, her proposal for future trading relationship with the EU. Let's take a listen.
And I'm grateful to the Lord Mayor and all his team at the Mansion House for hosting us this afternoon. And in the midst of the bad weather, I'd just like to take a moment before I begin my speech today to thank everyone in our country who is going the extra mile to help people at this time. I think of our emergency services and armed forces working to keep people safe, our NHS staff, care workers, and all those keeping our public services going, and the many volunteers who are giving their time to help those in need. Your contribution is a special part of who we are as a country, and it's all the more appreciated at a moment like this. Now, I'm here today to set out my vision for the future economic partnership between the United Kingdom and the European Union. There have been many different voices and views in the debate on what our new relationship with the EU should look like, and I've listened carefully to them all. But as we chart our way forward with the EU, I want to take a moment to look back. 18 months ago, I stood in Downing Street and addressed the nation for my first time as Prime Minister. I made this pledge then to the people that I serve. I know you're working around the clock, I know you're doing your best, and I know that sometimes life can be a struggle. The government I lead will be driven not by the interests of the privileged few, but by yours. We will do everything we can to give you more control over your lives. When we take the big calls, we'll think not of the powerful, but you. When we pass new laws, we'll listen not to the mighty, but to you. When it comes to taxes, we'll prioritise not the wealthy, but you. When it comes to opportunity, we won't entrench the advantages of the fortunate few. We will do everything we can to help anybody, whatever your background, to go as far as your talents will take you. We are living through an important moment in our country's history. As we leave the European Union, we will forge a bold new positive role for ourselves in the world, and we will make Britain a country that works not for a privileged few, but for every one of us. That pledge to the people of our United Kingdom is what guides me in our negotiations with the EU. And for me, that means 5 things. First, the agreement we reach with the EU must respect the referendum. It was a vote to take control of our borders, laws and money, and a vote for wider change, so that no community in Britain would ever be left behind again. But it was not a vote for a distant relationship with our neighbours. Second, the new agreement we reach with the EU must endure. After Brexit, both the UK and the EU want to forge ahead with building a better future for our people, not find ourselves back at the negotiating table because things have broken down. Third, it must protect people's jobs and security. People in the UK voted for our country to have a new and different relationship with Europe. But while the means may change, our shared goals surely have not: to work together to grow our economies and keep our people safe. Fourth, it must be consistent with the kind of country we want to be as we leave: a modern, open, outward-looking, tolerant European democracy. A nation of pioneers, innovators, explorers and creators. A country that celebrates our history and diversity, confident of our place in the world. That meets its obligations to our near neighbours and far-off friends, and is proud to stand up for its values. And fifth, in doing all of these things, it must strengthen our union of nations and our union of people. We must bring our country back together, taking into account the views of everyone who cares about this issue from both sides of the debate. As Prime Minister, it is my duty to represent all of our United Kingdom: England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, north and south, from coastal towns and rural villages to our great cities. So these are the 5 tests for the deal that we will negotiate: implementing the decision of the British people, reaching an enduring solution, protecting our security and prosperity, delivering an outcome that is consistent with the kind of country we want to be, and bringing our country together, strengthening the precious union of all our people. We are now approaching a crucial moment. There is no escaping the complexity of the task ahead of us. We must not only negotiate our exit from an organisation that touches so many important parts of our national life, we must also build a new and lasting relationship while, given the uncertainty inherent in this negotiation, preparing for every scenario. But we are making real progress. At the end of last year, we agreed the key elements of our withdrawal. We are in the process of turning that agreement into draft legal text. We've made clear our concerns about the first draft the Commission published on Wednesday, but no one should be in any doubt about our commitment to the joint report we agreed in December. We are close to agreement on the terms of an implementation period, which was a key element of December's deal. Of course, some points of difference remain, but I'm confident these can be resolved in the days ahead. Both the UK and the EU are clear: this implementation period must be time-limited and cannot become a permanent solution. But it is vital to give governments, businesses and citizens on both sides the time they need to prepare for our new relationship. With this agreed, I want both sides to turn all our attention and efforts to that new relationship. But before we can do that, we need to set out in more detail what relationship we want, building on my Lancaster House and Florence speeches. So last month, I spoke in Munich about the security partnership we seek. And today I want to talk about the other pillar of that relationship: how we build our economic partnership. In my speech in Florence, I set out why the existing models for economic partnership either do not deliver the ambition we need or impose unsustainable constraints on our democracy. For example, the Norway model, where we would stay in the single market, would mean having to implement new EU legislation automatically and in its entirety, and would also mean continued free movement. Others have suggested we negotiate a free trade agreement similar to that which Canada has recently negotiated with the EU, or trade on World Trade Organization terms.
Well, unfortunately, we have to cut it there. That was British Prime Minister Theresa May delivering a speech, an important speech, outlining detailed proposals for future trade relationship with the EU. However, stay with CGTN. Our news team will be covering that and will bring you the analysis. And I really would like to thank my 3 guests for having stayed with us. Yoritsumi Watanabe, Professor of International Political Economy at the Keio University in Tokyo, Max Wolf, Chief Economist at iCash Group in New York, and Mr. Xu Sitao, who's going to stay with us for the next topic, Chief Economist at Deloitte China. And you're watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after that. A video grabbed international media headlines showing 1,500 Chinese workers installing a new railway junction to upgrade a train station in just 9 hours. The construction took place in China's southwestern city of Luoyang in Fujian province in Fujian province, that is Longyan, I'm sorry, that's the city of Longyan in Fujian province in southern China overnight, and it happened overnight between the 19th and 20th of January. Now, the video went viral because Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, commented on it, praising the speed of China's infrastructure construction, especially compared to that in the US. However, some commentators have also accused the Chinese media of using the tweet as a propaganda tool. So what's behind the secret behind China's high efficiency, and what challenges are other developed nations facing when improving infrastructure capacity? Joining me for the discussion in the studio are Xu Sitao again, Chief Economist at Deloitte China, and Xu Qingduo, Senior Researcher of Pango Institution. First of all, let's take a quick look at the original video. It is said that 7 trains and 23 diggers were deployed for that evening. So very interesting, even for the Chinese. Gentlemen, Mr. Xu Sitao, what do you think made it necessary for 1,500 people to work overnight like that, even for China?
I think even for China, speed is important. First of all, I think speed in China is very different from speed elsewhere. But still in China, I think you just see this tenacity, and you also see this just sheer determination. I think it really boils down to the fact in China there is an overwhelming emphasis on infrastructure, because infrastructure is being viewed as a precondition of sustainable economic development. Actually, more than that, I think if you study recent economic history in China, it seems to me and decision makers, leaders, having taken a sort of no-nonsense approach and not just following textbook, being dogmatic. So that's all very much reflected in this short video you have shown.
Is that why it is possible for China to complete the upgrading of a train station in 9 hours, Mr. Xu Qingduo?
Well, I would say so, and also like China's speed, not only in this particular matter, but also if you look at China's economic development over the past 40 years, people say that's China's speed because that's unprecedented in history, history of human beings. And also if you look at the Chinese political system, I think it has its own advantages of like a quick decision making and a quick execution of the coordination and long-term planning. So that's the result. And now we have this one of the best infrastructure in the world.
Well, what made it possible, what made it necessary for 1,500 people to work like that? It doesn't happen all the time in China, does it?
No, I think that's obviously a precise planning. They needed to finish it at a certain timeline, following a certain timeline. So they are preparing basically for that line to be put into use for the new year, rush period.
Can we, Mr. Xu Sitao, can we compare the infrastructure construction capacity in China and that of other countries, Mr. Xu?
Well, I assume you want to compare China with developed countries. I think that's very different. First of all, in developed countries, as Mr. Xu said, the decision-making process is very different. Of course, citizens' involvement will be very important. And take United States, for example, and the federal government may take the lead, but in the end, many state governments have to chip in. That's why the current infrastructure plan being touted by President Trump may come short. So that's really just one difference between China and the developed countries. Now, if we can compare China with other developed countries, and for example, Australia, then people may say we really need to look into the rate of return of certain infrastructure projects. But in China, of course, the horizon is much longer.
Mr. Xixingduo, is there a cultural difference there, you think, or difference of circumstances?
I would say on both sides, actually. Different circumstances, China is now in the still primary stage of economic development, and infrastructure is playing a pivotal role.
So we're catching up. We're trying to catch up.
Right, to catch up. So infrastructure is important. If you look at developed countries, it's established, already been there, and you want to, it's like a reinvestment in that sector. But then it's a big question of how to finance such infrastructure projects.
Right. How do you look at the fact that such a video is made? What will be the purpose of making such a video? Is it to awe foreigners, or is it to show the kind of ability to perform, to operate, to achieve, Mr. Xi?
Well, I don't know the exact purpose, but one we can look at that is if we compare China with developing countries rather than developed countries, and most developing countries can never make it. This is so-called middle income trap. So I think China's perspective is, okay, now rather than just copying a textbook, why don't we just put more emphasis on infrastructure? Maybe that's one of the purpose of this short video.
Xingduo, your comment?
Well,
very briefly.
Briefly, I want to add, Mr. Musk, who is well known for his efficiency, right? For him, like 1 year is equivalent to 8 years for the rest of the world. So I think that's why I stress very much about the video, which shows the efficiency of the Chinese.
We have to leave it there. Many thanks to Xu Sitao, Chief Economist at Deloitte China, and Xixingduo, Current Affairs commentator. And here is a quick point. Installing a new railway junction to upgrade a train station in just 9 hours is a remarkable feat by anyone's judgment. When compared to how long infrastructure projects can take in the US, it is especially understandable that Tesla's Elon Musk would make such a comparison. However, some media outlets have focused on his tweet, calling it propaganda gold or manna from heaven for the Chinese media that's been covering the story. Perhaps the more important takeaway from the video is the power of teamwork and what's possible when efforts are aligned toward a common goal, a viable vision, no matter where the trucks are laid or train is going. That's all for this edition of The Point with me, Lu Xin. Thanks for joining us. We've got the point.